Welcome to the Answers Yes podcast, where we interview some of the most interesting people that have said yes to opportunities in their life. We hope that through these stories, you can learn to create your own destiny by saying yes along the way. Join us as we explore the new series covering topics such as passion, integrity, and hard work. I'm your host, Jim Riley, and I hope you enjoy these interviews as much as I do. I believe that everyone has an important message worth hearing. Hello, and thanks for tuning in to the Answers Yes podcast. Having a good time over here. Lots of great guests this year, and we're going to continue pushing this thing. It just baffles me how often we get requests to be on the show. I guess we've done the hard work, laid the foundation so the guests want to be here. We're somewhere around 70,000 subscribers on the show. So thank you for that. And if you like the show, share it. My goal is to hit that 100,000 number. I don't know what's going to happen then, but it seems like a good number to get after. This year, as you've probably heard me say many occasions, is I'm bringing guests on that are going to bring value to you and the things that you're doing. We all have our stories, and we're going to keep telling them because I think that's what gives us some foundation and some interesting things to talk about. But it's the value that they can also bring, adding something to your journey so that you can get a little bit further down that road. So today I've got Ben Albert on the line. Ben, thank you for being here.
Jim, I'm honored to be 70,000, man. Let's get to 75 by the end of this episode. This is going to be fun.
Let's push it. Most of it's just organic growth. We don't run a bunch of push tools and all those other things. We just put it out there in cyberspace and hope for the best. I know there's better ways to do that, but this is kind of a semi-retirement gig. I don't want to turn into too much work. But hey, look, I want to say that we were connected on LinkedIn, and I love that tool. Most of my entrepreneurs that I work with, I really encourage them to get on LinkedIn. I think people are there to be a little bit more serious than just post about their dog or, what they had for lunch. And I appreciate that. I like both, don't get me wrong, but I go to LinkedIn to kind of get a little bit more serious and peruse the professionals out there. So imagine you're probably the same.
Oh, yeah, I love LinkedIn. I've got a marketing firm, but 80% of what I do for myself is specifically LinkedIn.
Yeah. Well, it's a great tool out there. And now, are you paying for the pro level? Or are you just still getting what you can? Or what is your status, or how do you approach LinkedIn?
Hey, you can get what you can for free. Everyone needs to be on LinkedIn, utilizing that platform at least weekly. I specifically purchase Sales Navigator. Mm-hmm. And we can go in as deep into that as you'd like, but Sales Navigator just gives me such fantastic tools to search and filter and realistically connect with prospects on a social level, on a one-to-one level using LinkedIn.
Yeah, awesome. Well, let's do this. We'll come back to that.
Cool.
Let's start with a little bit of your bio. And this hits a sweet spot for a lot of people, right? It started out when COVID hit. Right when COVID hit. I'll let you tell the story, but I know our good friend Jim Beam was there.
It's funny when COVID hits, like it was a dark and stormy night. Yeah. It's almost cliche to start a sentence with that, but yeah, COVID hit. I found myself down and out, ultimately staring, and this wasn't a one-time thing. This was a multiple occurrence thing that I'm laying in bed staring at an empty bottle of Jim Beam whiskey. And I was in a really dark spot. I had just been furloughed from my sales executive role, a marketing firm doing video all across the state. So Texas, California, New York City, people in Minnesota and Wisconsin love me. Don't exactly know why, but Wisconsin especially loved me. There was no video, there was no travel, there was no sales, there was no fulfillment, there was no purpose. So no animosity. I'm let go from that role right at the start of COVID. And my father had drunk himself to death. I came from a tendency towards alcoholism, and I found myself in a very dark place. Kind of funnily, like I was doing two things. One, I was hiking, spending time in nature. I was reading and writing and doing some inner work. But at the exact same time, I was scared, sad. I didn't know what my next career move was going to be. I wasn't landing any jobs, and I was drinking myself to death. So it's hilarious. Like I'm doing all this inner work, but then I'm destroying my body because there is so much uncertainty and so much uncertainty in my life. we can go into exactly what I did at any details you want, whatever is going to be most beneficial for the listener. But ultimately, I started a business podcast, not really knowing what my next move was going to be. But I thought, hey, let's get an LLC. I'm a marketer. Let's give it a shot, kind of try to do that laptop lifestyle. And listen, Jim, there was no Elon Musk or Bezos on my wall. I didn't aspire or think that I'd be an entrepreneur. I was just in a dark place and thought, let's give this a shot. So I get an LLC. I get on LinkedIn originally because I thought it was a job board and tried to get a job. Then I realized it was much more of a social platform. Started networking on LinkedIn, launched a business podcast, and my first ever client randomly came out of the blue, found me on Google, asked if I could teach podcasting at their local charter school. So imagine how all this was weirdly happening for me, that I would have said no to that opportunity 100 times in a row. But since I had no reason to say no, I had no job, I had just made this LLC. That was my first big yes, that I said yes to this opportunity to teach something I didn't imagine I was going to be when I grew up. I suddenly was a teacher and then a podcaster. And then the podcasting led to relationships, relationships led to referrals, and led to me joining networking groups and joining leadership teams and brand teams and local advocacy. And then in just over a year, suddenly I've replaced my sales executive income as an entrepreneur. And not to brag or impress, just to impress upon the point that it wasn't easy. It wasn't simple. There was a lot of day-to-day work that needed to be done, but it's clearly possible. And now I'm just excited to have the humbling opportunity to talk about my story and learn by talking with people like you, Jim. So thanks again for having me here.
It's our pleasure, and it's a great story. And I do want to hear some of the details of that because look, people don't realize that sometimes the simplest solution in front of you is the solution, right? And if you go down that path, you're going to see the reward of it. Now, when you decided, okay, I'm going to open up my laptop here and get on LinkedIn and spend a little more time there networking and do this podcast, did you write a business plan around that? Or did you just fall into the next thing, into the next thing, into the next thing and go, wow, this seems to be working. Let me keep going down this road. How did you approach it?
No business plan. I'm a get feet in the fire, let's try something new kind of guy. I've spent a lot of my life in analysis paralysis and kind of edutainment, learning things, getting the education, listening to the podcast, reading the books, but never applying myself. And I just knew intrinsically that I just needed to apply myself and give it a shot. So the business plan was simple. Start a marketing company, website, SEO. Don't want to bore you with the products, but stuff that I know how to do. Let's start a company. Who is my target market? It's a business owner. No, obviously, it's a marketing for businesses. So how do I find business owners? Well, there's LinkedIn. There's business owners on LinkedIn. How do I get in the door with someone when everyone's cold calling them, stopping by, business cards, trying to pick their brain? How do I get in the door with them? Well, I could start a podcast and feature them for free and endorse them as Rochester's best roofer, Rochester's best accountant. I'm from Rochester, New York, so I called it Rochester Business Connections, quite literally because I wanted Rochester Business Connections, and I was a minnow in an ocean of sameness. Why don't I find the smallest pond possible? And that was Rochester Business Podcasting. And so I understood this, but there was no 6-month goal or analytics to base myself on, or honestly, I could teach this to someone, but there was no person to teach it to me. I just took the idea, put it into action, and figured it out as I got nosebleeds along the way.
Yeah, I love that. Well, you said a lot of compelling things that I think are important to bring up. First of all, a little fish in a big pond, right? I think oftentimes we get too wrapped up in, we got to go for the big pond. We got to go for the ocean, right? When I launched my tequila brand and we started talking about strategy, And our distributor's like, well, you got to be in San Francisco. That's where the people are. Or in LA, that's where the people are. I said, look, I can't afford to be there. How about we get Sacramento on board first, and then we'll work our way west towards San Francisco, because that's where the little fish were. Right.
Mhm.
And I realized nobody's paying attention to these people in Sacramento. They're all over in San Francisco spending their money. And we built our business around that. And it sounds like you did a lot of that in terms of, let's focus where the little fish are, because then all of a sudden you become much bigger if your voice is there. Talk a little bit about that experience, or how you even thought to do that. Where did you learn that from?
Yeah, and first off, lots of little fish equal a strong business. You don't need
Yeah.
all big fish, and little fish get bigger as they grow over time. So putting your chips on the little guy, they take a slight risk on you, you take a slight risk on them. You've got
Mm-hmm.
a business partnership that could last 10, 20 years. You guys can scale your companies together.
That's right.
So I'm all about putting my chips on the little guy and supporting them because I know it's just going to get bigger. Um, I'm rambling. I forgot the specific question. What
Well, just,
exactly did I do?
strategically, you went after the business in your own backyard,
Yeah.
right? Where most people are like, oh, well, especially you're on East Coast. Well, hey, I got to be in Newark or in Manhattan or Brooklyn. Instead, you're like, I'm going to focus right here in this small area.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
and through doing that, though, it's paid you dividends, has it not?
Yeah, growing incrementally from, here's the thing, if you're local, unless there's not a need for your service. So if you're an underwater basket weaver and there's already 15 of them in your city, there's a high probability that there's either high demand and maybe there is a need, or you're not going to have a business because there's too much competition in something too niche.
Mm-hmm.
So question number one is there a need for your service where you're trying to sell it? I'm a marketer in a medium to small city. There are plenty of businesses. There's hundreds of thousands of people. Yes, there's a need for marketing. So that's a check. And then it's, well, how are you going to stand out? Like, why would someone go for you? And if someone in your city isn't willing to put their chips on you, do you really think that the big shots in New York City or, San Diego or wherever it might be are going to want to work with your little old sole proprietorship, one man show, entrepreneurship consult? Like they don't give two shits about you.
Mm-hmm.
So I went local. There's a need for it in my city. If my local city doesn't want what I have to offer, I'm probably going to fail. And nowadays, I do work with businesses nationally. I mean, I have Cleveland and California and San Diego. I have clients everywhere, but it's because I built my reputation. I built my brand with my local community. And then I utilize the brand, the testimonials, the case studies to remarket myself to a larger group. But to shorten it and say it in one sentence, work the person right in front of you is the person you need to serve, and work locally, gain some momentum locally. It's so much easier, as you said, to scale to the big cities
Mm-hmm.
if you prove yourself even with the tiniest little local niche first.
Yeah, great piece of advice. The other thing you said, and I think a lot of people suffer from this, is you said that you suffered from paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
I see that all the time. What did that feel like for you, and how did you shake yourself out of that?
Well, most of my life. So, I was a quiet kid. I barely spoke the first 13 years of my life. Wanted to be a basketball player. Lived up to be 5'8", so definitely no chance of making it into the NBA, and got
Mm-hmm.
bullied and picked on a lot. So at a very young age, this growth mindset, this personal growth development was something that the people say you get into psychology. A lot of people get into psychology because they're trying to figure themselves out, or you get into therapy because you want to figure out what's wrong with yourself or someone in your family. I got into personal growth at a very young age because I wanted to know why I was so shy, why I was weird, or why I didn't fit in. So I had been reading the materials. I had been listening to podcasts for freaking since about 2014. I had been reading for years on end, and I hadn't been implementing anything.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I found internally, when you know the answer, but you're not doing the answer, it actually creates a lot of shame and frustration, and you don't want to speak up. It's like if someone's eating poorly, you don't want to be like, hey, you're eating poorly. You shouldn't eat this way. This is a better way to eat. If you're not treating your body right, who are you to tell someone what to do? So I understood business, I understood sales, I understood marketing, I understood personal development, but I was miserable in my job role, and I was like kind of ashamed of that. So it was
Hmm.
really just making the decision to say yes to say yes to myself, like say yes to doing things differently, because I spent most of my life in the infotainment stage where I would read something but not implement it. All I did, quite literally all I did, is start implementing the shit that I already knew.
Right.
Start answering the questions I already had answers to. And it sounds simple, but you really just got to take a step in the right direction and start moving with what you currently know, because you'll learn the rest along the way. You will not know it all.
Oh, yeah. I think people are looking for this complex solution to their life and not realize how simple it can be. You just need to get yourself out of problem. It's interesting because I've been doing this long enough, consulting clients, both whether it's the whole company or just the individual. Usually, the individuals, I could almost target it to the day. I tell my wife, like, this person's about ready to stop working with me. And she's like, how do you know? I said, because they're not doing the work. I can
Hmm.
give them all the advice in the world, but they're not doing the work. And eventually they start to plateau out. Their excitement is gone. They start plateauing out. They start getting frustrated. And then all of a sudden it's like they disappear because they're not what you said. They had the paralysis, right? They're overanalyzing everything that's been said. And then they want to hear it from the next coach for 6 months and then the next one for 6 months, never actually doing the work. I love what you just said. And that's, you just got to learn along the way sometimes. Just start and learn along the way.
Yeah, and there's two situations. There's it's all your fault. Like, Jim, I didn't get results and it's all
Yeah.
your fault, but it's really because they're not doing the work. Or I was the latter, it's all my fault. And then you lose confidence in yourself because you're not doing the work. So you're projected onto somebody else, or you start losing confidence in yourself. But either way, by not putting in the work, you're just hurting yourself. It's kind of sad, but it's true.
Yeah. Of course, you learn how to fend off these failures too, and hopefully cut
Yeah.
them off at the pass. Oftentimes, I've just told people, I said, look, business is effing hard. Okay, you want to succeed, you're going to have to put in the hard work. I can tell you all day long what to do, but eventually you're going to have to do it. Let's jump into a little bit of your marketing and some of the savvy that you have there that you've learned, doing it yourself. Where does somebody start? Where do you give the first piece of advice for somebody?
Yeah, so let's narrow this. So are we talking about a business owner building up their business brand, or are we talking about anyone across the board building up a personal
Yeah,
brand?
sorry, I could have been more specific.
No,
Let's just look.
I could go deep on either topic. That's
Yeah,
why I ask.
let's consider an entrepreneur just launched their business, right? They're living their dream all of a sudden, and it's time to grow their baseline. Okay, where do we go to start building that baseline of customers? Are the eyes and ears that they can at least tell their story to?
Yeah, so first off, unfortunately, because a lot of people aren't crazy about the internet, this is part of why you can outsource work to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be online because you want to be omnipresent. People have a supercomputer on in literally their fingertips at all times. So very simple thing, whether you could be a sole proprietor. Set up a Google business profile. It used to be called Google My Business, but if you've never heard of it, just Google My Business or Google Business Profile. That'll set you up with a landing page on Google where it's got your headshot, it's got images, it's got your services, it's got your hours, it's got your phone number, it's got your location if you have one, or it has your service area. You want people to be able to find you. So make sure you're found on Google, and then really start creating as much omnipresence as you can. You don't have to be posting on every single platform every single day. That's very difficult. But at least make sure you have a profile set up on every single platform. Use Facebook as an example. If you're a home improvement company and someone wants to tag you to recommend you, you need to have a profile set up to be taggable. So set yourself up on all the platforms. And then once that's all done, you're at least omnipresent, that you can be found in directories. The question is, where do I want to spend most of my time? In addition to that, where does my audience spend most of their time?
Mm-hmm.
So in my example, I'm a B2B marketer that's looking to help mostly B2B businesses with online marketing. Obviously, LinkedIn is a brilliant place to be. And by posting on LinkedIn, establishing myself as a thought leader in my space, whether or not someone's on LinkedIn, again, they look you up, they look up your resume, your qualifications, and then they see that you have LinkedIn clout. You clearly understand what you're doing, and you can help them with social media management. So choose one platform and just commit to maybe spending a half hour a day, at minimum an hour a week, being present on that platform. And we can get in the weeds if you want, but you can utilize the platform to connect with people, book calls, start conversations. Most of the podcasts I've been on and most of the clients I have were either someone I met on LinkedIn or someone that person knew. This is, again, nuance. I meet, someone brand new online. They're not a good fit for my solutions, but guess who is? Someone that they know and who trusts them. So then they become a referral partner. So you're building referral partners, you're building relationships, you're building reputation, you're getting better at what you do by posting new thoughts, tips, and tricks. And again, sounds overwhelming. Maybe just put, an hour a week into one platform and build that online reputation the best you can.
It's crazy because in my past life, working for that big corporate company, we had massive marketing dollars, right? And, you're going to run a 1-page ad and spend 20 grand, or a billboard and spend $5 a month, these big numbers. When you think about the opportunities that you're talking about, getting on free social media platforms and the eyes and ears behind those platforms for $0, why not? Right. And you're talking about getting on a half an hour a day as a recommendation. People are just missing the ball if they're not doing that. Yeah. It's not that hard. Question for you. And I don't remember exactly what the message was that you sent me on LinkedIn, and I get a fair amount of trolling on there. I would imagine that crafting the proper message to gain the attention of somebody is extremely important. So how do you craft that message? Because clearly I said yes to you, and I know I get I friend somebody else and I got 10 messages from them, like they're my best friend. Like, wait a minute. Something about what you had written me was different.
Yeah. I don't want to sound cocky, but I think I'm one of the best in the world at this. And the simple tip is hyper personalization. I'll give you the simplest example ever. And you're listening to this podcast, so it's really easy for you to do. Anytime, and I forget if it was Brendan. Is Brendan Kumarasamy been on your show?
No, it has not.
I don't want to just name all my friends. So it was someone I know was on your show, because anytime I have someone on my show, I've got my own podcast, Real Business Connection. So anytime someone's on my show, or I host an event, or they're speaking at an event, I always listen to some previous podcasts so I can get to know the person a lot better. Always make use of your time in the fullest extent. Get out as much juice out of every fruit as you can. So if you're already listening to this podcast, what you would do is you would write down minimum 1, maximum 3 takeaways. Anything more than that, you're just sending someone a brick of text. Take one takeaway. And this is a common message I send. It's, hey, I listened to Brendan Kumarasamy on your podcast. Great friend. He's actually speaking at my event next week. Love the show. And I don't connect just to say any blanket random copy paste statement. I say, hey, I listened to Brendan Kumarasamy on your show. Here's 1 to 3 takeaways I had. Really appreciate the amount of free value. Subscribed, Ben. That's one thing I always do is if I listen to a podcast, I hit subscribe. Sometimes I actually go and leave them a review. Then I reach out, let them know that I subscribed, And realistically, this doesn't take any additional time. I'm already listening to the podcast. It takes me about 20 seconds to do this.
Sure.
But what it does is it's a warm bridge to start a conversation. So it doesn't have to be a podcast. It could literally be, I watched your video on YouTube, or I read your book, or I saw you were mutual friends with this person, or let's say they're engaging on the same post you are. You can send them a connection request and say, I really like what you said about X, and continue the conversation in a one-to-one thing. But the key here is you're personalizing every single message. But because you're personalizing each message, your response rates are through the roof. And then the relationships you get to build is really the end game. You get to meet great people, start great conversations, and that leads to business, whether or not it's from them or someone they might possibly know. And that's the strategy, simply put.
I'm going to compliment you in this this brief story here, and as Ben suggested, we're not giving you numbers and stats to impress you, but it does help to understand the magnitude in which we're operating sometimes and how important the messaging is. So, Ben, I record 3 shows a week tops, right? Mondays are my recording days. I used to just be open. Now it's very specific because there's so many requests that come in. I probably have 5 to 10 publicists that I have allowed to work with me because they brought me good guests, right? Good value. The point is, I hear from each one of them at least once or twice a week. And usually when they send me like, hey, I've got 3 guests for you to consider, and I try to get through them, right? If I don't get back to them within a week, they're good at their job. They're hitting me up again. Okay. So I've got a lot of clutter coming in for people that want to be on my show. Same thing with all my platforms, and I'm on all of them, but I do a little bit more on, well, biggest one is Instagram and then LinkedIn. Here comes the compliment. The point is I get barraged with people wanting to be on my show, but here's your LinkedIn message. I pulled it up while you were talking.
Oh, cool.
It says, and we hadn't met before. We probably connected for whatever reason. You're a podcaster, and we both said yes, however. But it says, really enjoyed the episode with Carla Fowler, Jim.
Carla, yes.
Yep.
She was actually just on my show.
There you go, right? And that's what you said. She's fantastic. Having her on my show as well. Let's connect. And then I didn't respond. 2 days go by, and then you'd said, any other favorite episodes of the podcast you'd recommend, Jim? There's the compliment. There you are asking me. Yeah. You've enjoyed one of my guests, and you're going to have her on your show. So now you're asking me for an idea. And I sent you an episode, number 229, keeping smart people from doing stupid stuff, right? And you said, love it. I'll check it out, Jim. If a member of my network or I am possibly a good fit, are you open to any new value-driven guests? And so then the conversation can continue. I said, absolutely. Send an email to me with a bio of yourself or anyone else. I'll review all requests. And you said done, and you sent over your bio. Boom, it was done. We're talking about...
I never even pitched.
You never pitched. No, you were
like a publicist would send you. Yeah.
Yeah. You gave me a compliment. You were looking for additional shows, which there's the compliment, right? And I thought, okay, this person is not trying to get me in their group and force me into some meetings or pitching or solving my world problems, but very simply done. Now, if you're listening, as I mentioned earlier, my show has 70,000 subscribers. This will open up some doors for Ben somewhere, I hope. Otherwise, we're not doing our job. And it might not be tomorrow. It could be a year from now. But Look how little effort Ben put in to make this connection to get on the show. And I'm not trivializing what you did, Ben, because you did it perfectly, right? You are one of the best in the world, right? I just want to reiterate that and give you a compliment, because that's how easy it can be done if you're doing the work.
And there's first off, thank you. And there's so much little things going on there that when I listen to that episode that you recommend to me, first off, I know it's going to be a good one because you recommended it. I get to hear the show, see if I think I would even be a good fit in it. So get a vibe for the show, and make a decision. Do I want to be on this show? And if so, let's try to be on. I reach out to the guest that you had on. So I connect with the guest. I do the exact same thing. Hey, I listened to you on Jim's show. Here's one thing. And I just make a connection with the guest. And part of why I say, possibly might be a good fit, or I can recommend someone else, is worst case scenario, you're not a good fit and no one comes on. But middle case scenario, Ben's not a good fit, but one of my guests or member of my network is. I can play matchmaker, find you a better fit for your show, and then everybody thinks Ben's awesome for setting it up, when really all I had to do was send a, hey, Jim, meet Mark kind of message. So there's no losing in this game, and there's a lot of nuance points that you're tackling here. And I just wanted to get even more microscopic to show all the little things that are going on in just a couple messages.
Yeah.
Really just a couple messages.
Yeah, it's not that hard. So don't be discouraged by where you're at in business. Know that the tools are there. It's not that hard. It's a matter of putting some dedicated time in, and don't look at it selfishly. Look at it as, how can you help? And that's exactly how Ben approached this. Like the guest was looking for more content. And if he finally offered if anybody in his network would be a good fit for this show. Not that hard, people. Ben, tell us what else you do as we start to wrap this thing up a little bit, and how you can help in some of the other things that you're involved with.
Yeah, it's on my LinkedIn headline. I joke that I ask questions for a living. And there's two main categories. I mean, I've got Balbert Marketing. It's all about creating tailored solutions to very complicated custom problems. So really, like, it's asking the right questions to find the right answers. I've got a podcast that you can find anywhere you're listening to this show called Real Business Connections. Carla Fowler's been on that show as well. She's fantastic. But anywhere you're listening to this podcast, whether you're typing into Google or the podcast search bar itself, just type in Real Business Connections and you'll find me. But what's even easier is make sure you're leaving a review. Leave Jim a review real quick right now. And if you left a review, then go check me out. But I want to kind of plug that literally, like, part of why you're about to hit 75K subscribers is because every individual organically doing just a little thing to allow this message to reach more people. So I encourage people to leave this man a review. And then if you want to find me, it's not hard. Just a Google search away.
Awesome. Well, Ben, we appreciate what you're doing. We appreciate you climbed out of that hole and broke up with Jim Beam, because clearly you're bringing some more value to the world. I broke up with Jack Daniels about 8 months ago too. So we've all been there. But no, you're doing wonderful work. And I love how simple you've made it for people to find some success. I hope they reach out to you, listen to your show, and utilize your services, because it's not that hard, but sometimes we just need the path to be shown to us and walk that road. So Ben, thank you so much.
Hey, appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's show. It is my pleasure and honor to interview all of the guests that have been on the Answer is Yes podcast. If you have enjoyed the show, please go on iTunes and subscribe, give a rating, or simply tell a friend about the show. We also believe in the message of our guests and the positive influence of their stories. As my own mentor and coach, David Meltzer, has taught me, spend some time every day thinking and writing about the things in your own life that you have more than enough of. You will find out how blessed we really are. Please visit my website, livelifedriven.com, for the latest updates about me and what I'm doing. Plus, I post a monthly blog about the many topics on this show. This podcast can also be found there. As I learned early on in life, what you believe is what you will achieve. Thanks, Mark Victor Hansen, and thank you, and have a great week.